All righty, welcome. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. My name is Will Yerman. I am hang on, I have my little introduction sheet here, but welcome to the Fall Journalism Lecture Series. I'm the Norman Eberly Professor of Professional Practice at the Donald P. Bellisario College of Communications Journalism Department. I'm going to introduce our two guests, Alexis and Michael, in just a sec, just a couple of housekeeping things. I want to make sure to always thank the Eberly family for supporting what we do here at the college. They established an endowment in honor of Joe's father, Norman, who was a journalist and graduated from our college back in the 1920s, which is hard to even imagine. But he went on to a long career as a reporter and then as a writer. And this endowment honors him and allows us to do things like bring in speakers and do other kinds of activities during the year. We have one more lecture this fall. Next week, same time, next Wednesday, Tom Brenner, who is a freelance photographer and works in the DC area, is going to talk about his work and talk about his career and how he got into the business. And so that should be a nice way to wrap up. And then we'll do this again in the spring with a new cast of characters coming in to talk. If you've never been in a Zoom webinar before, this is different than a Zoom meeting. We can't see you, so you're safe. You can sit back and just watch us. As we go, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and Michael and Alexis will get to them later in the talk. What we're going to do tonight is Alexis is going to start and talk about herself, her background, kind of her career. Then we'll pass it on to Michael. He'll do the same. They both have some work to show, and then we'll regroup and talk about some things and take your questions. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we'll just get started. So I'm going to pass it off to Alexis and let her introduce herself, and then we'll hear from Michael, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you both for being here. Really looking forward to this. And Alexis, we'll let you go first.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Penn State, for having us. Still weird that to be in this position where people want to hear from me, so still getting used to that. But thank you guys all for tuning in. I'm Alexis Johnson. I'm actually from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I graduated from Indiana University of Pennsylvania in 2014 with a bachelor's in communications media. I worked at a closed captioning company. That was actually my first job out of college. And then I decided that that was not good enough for me. So I went to pursue my master's degree at Temple University, where I studied media studies and production. I worked a lot with Temple TV. It was always like kind of going head to head with the Penn State program as far as awards and things like that. But I was an anchor and reporter for Temple Update while I was there. Also, during my time in Philly, I was a production assistant at NBC 10, which is their NBC station in Philadelphia that covers Philly, Delaware, and South Jersey. And then when I graduated from Temple, I actually started my career in TV, stayed on that track, and I was an MMJ, or what they call multimedia journalist, in a small market in Bluefield, West Virginia. I was there for about 8 months. I was a one-man band. I was totally shooting everything myself. I was on camera. I was editing all my own stories. So I really got like a really like on the ground, hand-in-hand experience in producing local news at that level. And then I switched to digital, and I went on to work at NJ.com in New Jersey, which is also called the Star Ledger / NJ.com, covering the entire state of New Jersey. And then I got the opportunity to come home and work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in 2018. I actually started on the digital team there as well. And I was manning the website and I was doing social media. And then in February of this year, I switched to a reporting role. I was covering trending stories, more kind of social media stuff, viral news, things happening in Pittsburgh, more featurey kind of things. But then COVID-19 happened and all beats went out the window. And it was all hands on deck with COVID stories. So I was doing a lot of work with that. And then Memorial Day weekend, George Floyd was killed. And we had protests here in Pittsburgh. Just like we saw kind of across the nation where there was, just a lot of tension, some looting. I sent a tweet that is now embedded into my history forever and ever. But if for anybody that is unfamiliar with my story, if you Google Alexis Johnson, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, there has been a ton of coverage on it because after I sent this tweet, my editors of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette said that I was biased and I could no longer cover Black Lives Matter protests because of the nature of the tweet. And so from there, I kind of got thrust into the spotlight once that happened. And because of that, I actually got a call from Marsha Cook, who is the Senior Vice President of Vice. She actually went to Temple. I met her at my time at Temple, and she said, "Hey, we have a position here. Would you like one?" And I said, "Of course." And it took me a couple months to interview and kind of get that situated, but I started at Vice News at the beginning of October. And I actually, my first kind of, well, my first story, I did Instagram Live with the president of Planned Parenthood, whose name is also Alexis Johnson. But my first on-air experience, I covered the election, which was last week. I was in Philly for a week, actually just got back home yesterday. So I wanted to share a video of what I got to do over the weekend when Philadelphia reacted to the news that President-elect Joe Biden had won. So who can share? Okay, optimize desktop. Oh, I have to allow the system preferences. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have to go like to my settings for this. 1 second.
I'm back. It's not letting you share.
It's saying I have to allow Zoom to share my screen by going to System Preferences, Security, and Privacy to grant access. So let me find that.
Okay.
It's not sharing right now, is it?
No, not yet.
Okay. Let me. Oh, okay. I think this is actually.
If you look in the chat, Kurt Chandler just shared a link to the, I assume to Alexis's tweet. I haven't actually gone and followed the link.
Not be able to record the content of your screen until it is quit. Oh.
Oh wait, he only shared it with panelists.
If I, it's saying I have to maybe quit and come back in so that the settings can update. Would it let me come back in if I click the link?
It will, yeah. If you want to leave and do that, you can do that.
Okay. Sorry, BRB.
Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself while we're waiting, and then we can jump back to Alexis? So how long have you been at the, you're muted right now, but how long have you been at the, how long were you at the Post-Gazette?
Okay, my bad. I shut down the screen for a little bit and I couldn't figure out how to get back.
No problem.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I just wondered how long had you been at the Post-Gazette before you left? I mean, I know you're going to talk more about you, but. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the Post exactly 2 years. Right when everything started with me and Alexis. I mean, I don't know. Should we? I mean, I could start until she comes back.
Hang on, I think she's there. I'm gonna make her. Somehow she got bounced out. There, now she should be able to join us again. I hope.
Okay, I'm back. Yay. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry.
No problem.
Who can share Wait, share screen.
I'm gonna go dark again.
Okay, there we go. Optimize share screen for video clip. Oh, it's asking me for a password. Jesus. Okay, hold on. Should probably. You see? Is it shared?
Yep, we can see you. We can see your screen.
All right, awesome. Okay. Here is this video that I made. We're here in downtown Philadelphia, actually circling City Hall with what looks like hundreds of people who have been telling me all night that they are just feeling mostly relief. They said the last few years have been a lot, but they said the last few days have been even worse, just waiting to see what happens. A lot of people were giving credit to Philadelphia for flipping Pennsylvania, but most importantly, Black voters in Philadelphia. How does it feel to be a part of that change?
It's always important. Our people died just for these rights. You know what I mean? So to get out there and do it, and there's a lot of people who can't vote. And anybody who can vote, you need to get out there and vote. I don't care who you voting for, but you need to exercise that right.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
What are you looking forward to the most for the next 4 years?
I'm looking forward to a solid plan and some organization towards the Black Commonwealth and upgrading the urban areas and actually seeing these people keep their word for once. And if not, we're gonna be out here, we're gonna be marching, we're gonna be doing the same thing we've been doing until we make more change.
I'm just here to forget everything that's been happening the past 4 years.
What's the difference between today and how you felt in 2016?
Well, in 2016, I was kind of like, there was that feeling of like, I could either be sad or I could just try to ignore everything. So it was that just coasting.
Philly was such a big part of flipping PA from red to blue. What did it feel like to be a part of that historical moment and push that over the thing?
Amazing!
Flip-adelphia? That's funny.
I've never been more proud to be a Philadelphian than during the selection.
I feel like we've grown up in such a different time, such a new time than any other generation. Like, we are so involved in, we say politics, but it's not politics, it's human rights. And I feel like that's what our generation has understood more than anything before. There's so much on the line, and we really got that.
I mean, it just vibes all around.
Equivalent to when the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Okay, so yeah, I was actually in Philadelphia for the entire week last week. That was one of the stories that I did out of many for last week, like, you know, on election day and actually covering the reactions to the results. So I would just say overall, my career so far has been very untraditional. I went from, you know, I've had experience in local news television, now national news television, digital, social media, print. And that was all really by happenstance. And I kind of just took whatever opportunity was made available to me at the time. Especially when I left local news, when I left West Virginia, I kind of was like, I mean, we can get to why I did, but you know, I wanted to be on TV for so long. And then when I got there, I didn't really like it, that kind of form of television. So, you know, I was just really just trying to figure things out. But what I will say is that it all worked out, and wherever I was at the time, I needed that experience to get to the next step. So that's pretty much it for me, and I'll let Michael Santiago take it over.
Thanks, Alexis. So yeah, I guess I can start out. So I actually went back to school late in my 30s. And when I did, I went to San Francisco Art Institute, which is traditionally an art school. So, and I knew that I wanted to do photography. So I was into art photography. And my junior year is when I started to do more documentary and photojournalism work studying under Darcy Padilla. And that's when I realized that I fell in love and this is what I wanted to do. My senior year at undergrad, I won a scholarship that allowed me to go to grad school because I knew that I wanted to do journalism, but I didn't know how to become a journalist. I didn't know how to go about it because I was going to art school. So that grant allowed me to go to grad school, and you know, I got to grad school. I want to say that I learned how to be more of a technical photojournalist. I learned how to properly, how to do stories, how to research stories properly, how to write captions. But I didn't feel that I was ready yet for, I guess, the outside world. One of the things that I always said when I was in college was that I didn't want to work for a newspaper, that I wanted to go off. Like, I had this grandiose idea that I was going to be a freelancer and, you know, work on the stories that I wanted to work on, work here and work there. And that really wasn't the case. So when I graduated from grad school and I started freelancing in New York, the first couple of months were really great, but then things just dried out. I wasn't getting any work at all. And I was nervous about what my next steps were going to be. And luckily, I had a former mentor of mine who called me about a position that was open at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I took it. I took it, I mean, for several reasons. One, because, you know, I needed to work, and it was a way for me to, you know, to actually work for a newspaper for the first time, because I never had any internships. I didn't know how the newspaper would work. And I also, like, you know, I'm from New York. You know, I was born in Dominican Republic, but I grew up in New York. I lived here for over 20 years. But the Pittsburgh Steelers were my favorite football team. So I'm like, I get to go to Pittsburgh, live in Pittsburgh, and possibly cover the Steelers. Hell yeah, I'll do this. So I got to Pittsburgh, and I can honestly tell you that my first month there was horrible. I sucked. I wasn't good at it. And to the point where one of the editors at our time, you know, like he sat down with me one day and he looked at me. He was like, you know, I don't think you have it. And I went home depressed because, like, you know, here's somebody who's supposed to encourage me and help me become better, telling me that I don't have what it takes to be a photographer in the newspapers. And like, that kind of like ate at my stomach. And I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna prove this guy wrong. And I ended up like actually getting better at what I was doing. You know, one of the things that I didn't realize of the skills that newspaper world gives you is, like, you know, prior for me to get in there, I only used one lens. I used a 35mm lens. So I didn't know how to use any other lens. So, you know, working at the paper, it allowed me to experiment with different lenses, you know, telephoto lenses, long ones, short ones. And one of the things that, you know, working in the newspaper, especially in the places where it's just you're localized, like Pittsburgh, is that you don't have any kinds of crazy events happening all the time. It just so happened that in Pittsburgh, my first year there, you know, unfortunately, we had the murder of Antoine Rose, and we also had the Tree of Life shooting. So there were a lot of national big things that were happening there. But oftentimes, you know, a lot of our assignments were smaller assignments where, you know, you go out and find features and things that are not necessarily like glitzy and kind of boring. But one of the things that I learned at the paper is that you have to make those boring assignments look amazing for your readers. So that's one of the biggest things that I took away from working at the paper. And I felt that, you know, working there, it helped me grow as a photographer because it helped me use different tools and just see things better. Not only that, is that it also helped me become a better editor of my images and look at different images. At the time before she left, Sally Stapleton, who's now editor at AP, one of the things that she told me is that, you know, when I'm going through my images before I hand images in, look at images and you know, and submit the images that resonate and bring some kind of feeling inside you. When you look at them, it brings back a memory, whether that or feeling, whether that's it's love, anger, sadness. Those are the most successful images that help you that resonate some kind of emotion inside of you. So I was at the paper for about 2 years until Alexis got hyphy with editors. And you know, one of the things that, you know, I want to say maybe since the death of Trayvon Martin, one of the things that one of the conversations that continues to happen around Black Lives Matter is that there isn't women aren't spoken enough in this movement. It always seems people always, you know, it always comes to that sometimes women are afterthought and Black women aren't protected as much as they should be. So when what happened to Alexis, off the bat, I was like, I got your back. You know, like that Monday before she even found out that she was being disciplined, we were already texting back and forth because we had gotten an email, and we both thought that it was about both of us because we both were tweeting. But you know, like, I never thought twice about having Alexis back, and I had her back. And eventually, you know, I was never given a reason why I was taking off coverage, but it seemed like it was a retaliation. So after I got taken off coverage, I basically spent the last month at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette either not getting assignments or I was just doing random stuff that didn't go anywhere. But for the most part, I wasn't doing anything. And one of the things that happened is that I started getting once our story pretty much went national and it was pretty much getting covered by everybody, I had different photo editors and photographers reaching out to me, asking, pretty much helping me get prepared to become a freelance photographer. And luckily, one of the editors who had been watching my work for some time was the editor at Getty. And, he basically said, we talked, we spoke for about an hour and, he had read everything, he had seen the interviews, but he wanted to hear my side of the story from me personally. He ended up offering me a job. I mean, he was already watching my work prior to that. And he pretty much, I guess, snagged me up before somebody else did. So that happened in July. So I've been working with Getty Images since July. I'm a staff news photographer. For there, I cover mostly just straight news. And I'm based out of New York, out of Brooklyn, but I do travel the country. I mean, I seem to be traveling almost like 2 to 3 weeks, which I don't mind because that's kind of basically what I wanted to do. I didn't know how newspapers work. So when I got to Pittsburgh, I honestly thought that when I got there, they'd be sending me over here and over there covering stuff. So I'm actually kind of glad that that's what I'm doing now. And I'll show you guys work that I've done from July to September, just a little snapshot of it. Can you guys see the screen? Now I don't even know how to do this. So my very first assignment at Getty just happened to be the 6th-year anniversary of Eric Garner's death. And it was wild that, I was taken off from covering, I was not allowed to cover one of the biggest civil rights movement of our time. So I ended up coming to New York to covering one of the biggest things that's happened in New York since the murder of Amadou Diallo. This is Trayvon, I don't know why I keep calling him Trayvon, Eric Garner's daughter. And one of the biggest differences between working at a newspaper and working at Getty is a wire service. So a lot of our images are used nationally and internationally. So if I'm out photographing something, it's for a certain purpose. I'm not just photographing stuff just because something just, like at the Post-Gazette, sometimes we would have to go out and just find feature images. Here, I'm photographing something for a purpose. And it's been a wide variety of different things. But New York, just like everywhere else, there's been protests and marches going on all the time. And that's pretty much that's pretty much a few months worth of work from about July to September. So I've been all over the place since then. Since then, I mean, I just got back recently. I was in Maine covering the Senate election there. So I mean, I've been all over the place, and that's pretty much it.
So thank you. That was great hearing kind of both of your journeys to where you are now. And it's interesting to me that it's not sort of the traditional path. We have a lot of students listening right now who are in a journalism program who might be thinking that they need to go get an internship and go from a small paper to a big paper. And you guys obviously have taken, different paths to get to this place you're in now. Part of it, just events that kind of happened and you've sort of rolled with the punches, other sort of conscious choices. So I would like to kind of come back and talk about, the finding of a job and how you kind of advance. But I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what happened in Pittsburgh. I know you guys have been interviewed and talked about it a lot. And it's almost absurd. I mean, when you think about it, like, I'm not sure that there's a big lesson to be learned from how badly you were treated by the Post Gazette and what happened. It seems sort of ridiculous, but I wonder if the brief summary, at least as I've read it, is that, Alexis, you tweeted this sort of satirical tweet about, comparing the mess left over from a concert to, you kind of played off of the perception that people were, destroying the streets of Pittsburgh because of, the protests. But it feels to me like the reaction that you got, and then Michael, you got by, tweeting your support, and some other journalists, it sounds like, at the paper as well, is that there was this perception that because you were Black, somehow you couldn't objectively cover these protests. Is that a fair description?
Yeah.
And how do you respond to that? Like, what do you even say to that, sort of the bigger picture?
Yeah, when I got the phone call that I was not going to be allowed to cover these protests because of that tweet, I specifically said, how is this bias? How is this showing any bias? If we're talking, what two sides, there's this old cardinal rule of objectivity in journalism. And I think what my situation really has done is sparked a national conversation about what objectivity means and who created those rules and who those rules serve and who are we trying not to offend. So when we're talking about objectivity in the guise of racism, which is at the heart of everything in this country, it's like there are no two sides to that. There are no two sides to discrimination. There shouldn't be two sides to calling out a double standard of how Black people are viewed when they trash the city versus how predominantly white people that go to country music concerts are viewed when they trash the city, which is like a known thing in Pittsburgh that, the Kenny Chesney concert, Luke Bryant, whoever comes to Pittsburgh, they, the city has to have this big plan in place on how to deal with the 40,000 people that come down and just leave behind a huge mess. So, I said specifically to the managers at the time that I thought that I was being taken off this coverage because I was Black and because I was speaking out on a Black issue. And that, quite frankly, white people talk about white issues all the time, and there is no kind of otherness about like whether they would be biased or not, because that's just kind of the status quo and the way of the land. And they told me that they thought it was political. I then again disagreed and said I don't think racism is a politics thing. I still firmly don't believe that Black Lives Matter is a political issue. It's talking about human rights. And, as journalists, we kind of need to be on the side of like doing no harm. Like, there's a line when you're talking about objectivity and like who's all these different views we need to be shining a light on. I mean, it's not saying to ignore people who feel a certain way or feel opposite than you do, but when it comes to, like I said, specific human rights and civil rights, I think there kind of needs to, be some type of bias, if you will, or leaning on the side of doing no harm. And quite frankly, the fact of the matter is everybody has a bias. It's impossible to be a journalist and not have a bias. If you're a mother who has a student in the district that you cover, or you're a Post Gazette journalist, tons of the journalists have kids. You think they're not biased when they're covering the school board and how these things affect their kids? Or if you're talking about climate change, is there no bias of how this affects the air that you quite literally breathe? I mean, it's like we come from different backgrounds, and that's why you diversify newsrooms, so that you can have all these different biases in your coverage and they can represent the people that you actually are covering. So I think that was the major lesson, is kind of just getting that conversation going about what objectivity means, who enforces those rules. There was a white coworker of mine who was also spoken to about his tweet of that weekend, and he was not taken off coverage and I was. So which was kind of like a clear guise for discrimination. Even though we were both given a warning, I was the only one that was disciplined in that way. So yeah, I think that really was, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I didn't want this to happen to me. Obviously, I didn't think this was going to happen to me. But if I was, you know, if I became a part of this larger conversation about how journalists of color are treated in newsrooms, specifically when it comes to covering stories about people of color, then I'll take it. I'll take it. We're here now. So,
Michael, I wonder, as a you know, as a photographer, your experience on the street is a little bit different, and I noticed in some of the images you showed, you were covering, you know, MAGA rallies and Trump rallies. And I just wonder what, I guess maybe it's sort of the same question to you. What's your perception beyond just Pittsburgh, where I know there are some personality issues with the owners of the chain and things that are, you know, specific to Pittsburgh, but this bigger issue of being a journalist of color, and what does that mean now, and how is that role changing?
I think the way it's changing is that there, you know, for the most part, a good decent handful of us are getting a larger platform, and we have the ability. We're getting amplified, and we're talking, and we're out there. I mean, there's Abby Phillips who works at CNN, and I'm gonna butcher her name, but homegirl with NPR who covers the White House. There's a Stad Wesley who's out. Go ahead, yeah, you meet you. There's Nicole Hannah Jones. Like there's it's also Wesley Lauer. Also, like there's a good handful of people who are getting amplified and whose work is being out there and being heard. And I think more often than not, like we're being taken seriously. I think the only people when Trump started running for president, the only people who were calling him out and saying he was racist were Black journalists. Nobody else was doing it. And it wasn't until now where people are actually finally calling him a racist for what he is. And I think that, and a lot of the alarm bells that were being rung when he announced his candidacy were journalists of color, and everybody pretty much thought that we were overblowing it, and that obviously that wasn't the case. So I think now, I think the last 4 years have shown that journalists of color need to have a more of a platform and need to be have our work amplified, because like a lot of the stuff that happens in this country and the things that we cover, we've experienced it. Like when I'm out there covering, let's say, issues that deal with police brutality, I'm not just photographing and working and telling stories of people who look like me. I'm telling the stories of myself, my friends, and my family, because more often than not, we've experienced that. So it's, I don't know. I'm hopeful that there's a dynamic and there's a change that's happening. So I'm hopeful for the direction that journalism it's where it's going. I don't know if that answers the question, because that was all over the place.
No, I thought that was great. And I don't know, I was looking for a specific answer. And I will say at this point that if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and we will kind of take those as we go. Alexis, you made a point that being white is sort of the status quo, so white people never get accused. You never get told you can't cover a protest because you're white or whatever it might be. And I just wonder, I guess I wonder, how does that feel as as journalists in a newsroom, but just as sort of human beings, to be like, I don't know what that experience is like. I'm white, right? Yeah. So I'm just wondering if you guys can talk sort of how that feels, that sort of built-in sort of assumption.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and you kind of always have to, it's cliche to say, people of color have to work 2 times harder than everybody else in the room, and you kind of always have to, like, I feel like, be on your best behavior, and there is no room for error. There is no room for mistakes, because as soon as you make one, you're going to get called out for it and you're going to get punished. Like there was no, like perfect example for me and my white coworker, like he got grace. He got grace that I didn't get. He got, hey, this tweet, here's a warning, watch yourself. And they went on about their business, and an hour later or before, whichever, I think he got called for me, or however, I was taken off the coverage. And then a couple of days later, we said, hey, well, why don't you take so-and-so off? And oh yeah, we should probably do that. It's like, it's just kind of this automatic thing where journalists of color or people of color, period, in any type of work dynamic, I feel like are maybe scrutinized more than others, because it's kind of this feeling, it's like, oh no, you're lucky to be here. For example, there was only me and Michael Santiago made up 7% of the newsroom that was Black. There were 2 Black editors out of probably a dozen. One of them was over sports and the other one was a copy editor at night, which more so handled the print side of it. So there were no, if we're talking about, you know, who our editors were that was in charge of our coverage for local news, for crime, for business, for education, for art, all these different things that we cover, none of them were even people of color. They're just all white. You know, it's not even, except for Arturo, and he was over our photography.
Yeah, but he didn't do nothing. So I mean, he was just part of the status quo there.
You say that. I mean, that was your boss, not mine. But yeah, I mean, but you know, imagine being in his position where he's, you know, one of the only, you know, editors of color, and he has to kind of make sure he doesn't say the wrong thing to get fired. You know, that kind of thing. So it really is. I guess what you were asking is the feeling. It's frustrating. A lot of code switching, and you know, it's just I'm grateful for my position at Vice because they've really given me the space to just be myself, and they encourage that. But I hope that more, you know, after seeing my story, that there are more journalists of color who feel more courageous to speak out for themselves. And, you know, because we feel microaggressions and discrimination all the time, and, you know, but we got to keep this job, and we don't want to, you know, be the angry Black woman in the room, and we don't want to be the one causing all the stir. So we kind of just let it bounce off of us. And, you know, but that time, there was that one time where I was like, no, that's enough. Like, I'm not going to stand for this. I say it all the time, but once I got off the phone with my managers, I immediately called my mom. I was like pacing back and forth. I'm like, I can't believe this happened to me. And like, you know, but you know, it really was also a story of allyship. And like for you to be the white man in the room that comes to, you know, that comes to my defense, or, you know, somebody empowered to come to my defense. If it wasn't for the union at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, none of this would have been possible. They were able to back me. I had that protection to where I could say whatever I wanted about what was going on social media and in interviews without fear of being fired. And a lot of, you know, like I said, if we were 7%, you know, the other 90% of the newsroom came to me and Michael's defense. They started that I Stand With Alexis hashtag that ended up going viral in Pennsylvania. So that was just a true story. You know, they put their jobs on the line. A lot of them had their stories taken off the website for supporting me, like actually had their stories deleted after they had covered something. So like everybody kind of put it out all on the line for us because it was a situation about like right and wrong. So I just hope that I have inspired other people to stand up for themselves. You know, it may not end up how mine's did, but I had no idea that I would be getting all this support and attention just because I was like, hey, no, like this isn't right. Like, I don't think this should have happened. And that's how it ended up. So I would just say, take that risk because it'll be worth it in the end.
Yeah, and I never thought twice about standing up for Alexis and having her back. I think one of the saddest things that I saw when all that was going on was that somebody had done one of those Twitter moments, you know, about people in journalism who didn't have anybody to stand up for them when something happened at the workplace, and they're no longer in journalism. And there were tons of people talking about their experiences, and I'm like, damn, like, you know, like what if I hadn't stood up for Alexis? What if we didn't have a union who have our backs, who would still be in journalism? And, you know, I think about, like, you know, all those people who were no longer in journalism because of that, the stories that are left on the table because they weren't there. Imagine the stories that would have been left on the table if me and Alexis, if we would never be allowed to be in journalism again, if nobody had our backs. You know, and going back to something you said about, you know, like, that you said that, you know, that you're white, you don't think about certain things sometimes when covering different things. The funny thing about all of this is that the images of the concert that Alexis had tweeted out were my images of the Conchesty concert.
Totally
Before
accident.
One of the things that happened before I went out and photographed those images is that I went to my editor. I'm like, look, the Kenny Chesney concert has a reputation, and we all know country concerts sometimes are filled with with white folks, and sometimes white folks racist white people, you know. And I told them, you know, what do I do if I come across an incident where I have a drunk white person trying to fight me or something? And our editor at the time was like, you know what? Like, in the years that I've been here, I've never had to think about that, sending off a photographer and having them being worried about them. So like, it comes full circle in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have those discussions unless you have a diverse newsroom, right? I mean,
Exactly.
everyone around you looks like you, then you're not having that conversation. So I think that's really important. There's actually a one question's come in, and then maybe we can come back to this, but I didn't want to forget it. So someone is asking, are you able to touch on the Post-Gazette endorsing Trump? Is that ethical for a newspaper to do, and how did it make you feel? If you want to talk about that.
That happened after I left, so I wasn't there for that. Was I surprised? No. Our editors, our owners, the Block twins, Block Communications Incorporated. You can Google photos of them on Trump's plane, and also Keith Burris, who was the editor at the time when all these things happened, and now he's over our editorial board. He also has photos with Trump. So that just did not surprise me. As far as ethics is concerned, it's not uncommon that a newspaper would endorse a candidate. That is a thing. I don't know. I mean, it's not as popular anymore, but when newspapers were very, important in the communities and things like that, they would endorse candidates. So that's not uncommon for a newspaper to do, but for them to choose Trump was not surprising to me now.
Yeah, it wasn't surprising for me either to see that endorsement. As far as the ethics about it, newspapers do endorse candidates all the time. I wasn't surprised it happened. And to be completely honest, had I still be there, I would have quit that day.
Over the endorsement?
I would have quit.
That's interesting. Yeah. So for students, newspapers for a long time have had a tradition of having a divide between the newsroom, which is supposed to be fair and objective, and then the opinion page and the editorial board where they write opinions, and they're supposed to be separate. And at most newspapers, I think there is some degree of separation between that. So endorsements have a long tradition at newspapers, both, liberal endorsements and conservative endorsements. And it's not supposed to impact how the reporting happens. How true that is a big question. And I do think it shapes people's perception of newspapers. You think of if a newspaper endorses a particular candidate, it's hard not to think that that's, that bias might creep into
coverage would be slanted. Yeah,
for sure. So a question from Kurt Chandler, who's one of our faculty, asks both of you guys, when you chose the jobs that you were going to take after you left the Post-Gazette, what type of manager were you looking for? And I wonder, did that play into your decision of where to go?
Me specifically, I mean, when I was interviewing for Vice, all the managers were just very empathetic to my situation. They thought that it was outlandish what had happened to me. So, and I think, no, if there was a manager that thought otherwise, they wouldn't have reached out to me. So, without what I was looking for, I guess, was really that space to be myself. I mean, I interviewed with all women, which is kind of the first time that it's ever happened. I had maybe 3 or 4 different interviews, and they were all women except for with my bureau chief in DC now, Sebastian Walker. But other than that, it was all women. So that was a plus for me to see women in these positions. A few of them were women of color, and I just, for this, I was like, I have nothing else to lose. Like, I'm just going to totally be myself. Like, there was kind of that, like, there was no like polishing up and let me hope I impress them and let me kind of fit in this box and be like the perfect candidate. Like, I was talking to them just how I'm talking to you guys now, and we were just having like genuine conversations, and that just really felt right to me, that I didn't have to try to be somebody else, and that they really wanted me to come on and be myself. And that was huge for me, that I didn't have to really kind of, code switch or like be kind of this proper person. And like, I was generally just speaking how I normally speak to my friends to them, and that is kind of Vice's whole vibe anyway. So it's just like a really good fit for me.
Yeah, I mean, I basically had the same experience as Alexis. The person who reached out to me, like he basically, I mean, it was kind of like a mentorship conversation about, about my experiences and what had happened to me. It was kind of like he was just making sure that I was in a way that I was okay. And then, when you offered the job to me, it was more like, I'm not offering this job to you because of what happened to you. I'm not offering this job to you because we want to diversify our newsroom. You know, I'm offering this job because we truly really want you here because we believe in you and the work that you do, and you know, in your potential and your growth. You know, it's one of those things. You know, when I one of the things that I had said during one of the talks that me and Alexis had is, how can I work with somebody who doesn't love me? And I kind of felt that he was like, I want to say that he was embracing me in a way, kind of like in a comfortable way, and that's the way it came out. You know, in my 2 years that I worked at the Post Gazette, not once had I ever had John Block say one word to me. You know, before word got out that I was even hired at Getty, Mark Getty, who was the founder of Getty Images, of the Getty, sent me an email welcoming me to the company. You know,
wow, that's awesome.
So it's just, you know, everybody from the top down at Getty knew what I had experienced at Getty. I mean, at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. So it wasn't like nobody knew what happened to me, and it just felt welcome. You know, when it felt welcoming. I felt like, in a way, I was coming home. And ever since then, that's pretty much how it felt. Like I'm in a home, and I'm no longer in an abusive relationship.
That's a great image. So we have a question from one of our photojournalism students, Lily, who asks, what steps need to be taken and what traditions need to be broken to better diversify newsrooms and amplify the voices of journalists of color?
I think it's not just about hiring more people of color, but it's making sure that they have a path to A, succeed, and B, move up. Because I guarantee you, if there was one editor of color, or Black editor, you know, at the time that thing happened with my tweet, like, somebody would have stopped it and said, hey, like, you know, let's rethink about this. We could talk to her about the tweet, maybe give her a warning, ask her to take it down, et cetera, but don't you think this is a bit extreme? And they would have been able to have that conversation and have more leverage to talk about if it was biased or not, and was it, you know, extreme to take me off the coverage. So it's really about at the top, because like it doesn't, like, I've had conversations, I've pitched stories where I had to pitch it a little bit harder, you know, because it was about people of color or something that they didn't really understand, or like, hey, no, this word is important, like this word isn't important to that group, or, you know, this framing is important to this group because this is the specific audience that will understand it even if you don't. So like, you know, no matter what, if you have an editor or producer or whatever, whether you're in TV or print, there are people that, you know, see your product before it hits the page or hits the screen, and they have the final say so. So if those aren't people that have experiences, the same experiences as you, or are empathetic at least to your experiences, then it can make those kinds of things difficult. So I would say, you know, it's not really just about like hitting diversity numbers, as Michael Santiago just pointed out, but making sure that we're working to retain journalists of color. We're working to, you know, show them like there is, you know, we don't want you to leave after a couple years, and, you know, we really want to help you grow and make you a better journalist, or make you a better, you know, photojournalist, or whatever the case may be. And also there might be some potential for you to move up and become an editor or a senior reporter, or whatever the case may be. So I think that step of it is really not talked about enough, because people kind of just want to be like, oh, look, we hired a bunch of people of color, and that's it. And it's like, that's not enough if they're still answering to a predominantly white editor staff.
Yeah, it's all about cultivating your talent. You know, like, you know, increasing your diversity numbers is important, but cultivating that talent and helping them grow to become better journalists is one of the most important things, because, you know, the better that your employees are at what they do, the better work that you're going to get. So I mean, that's pretty much goes to that.
What do you think? Well, sort of a two-part question in my head, so let's see if I can make sense of it. But, you know, obviously the value of hiring journalists of color benefits them, right? It gives opportunities to people who didn't have opportunities. So what's the benefit to the audience, you know, who's white and black and brown and all shapes and sizes? Well, let me ask that, and then I have sort of a follow-up maybe. So I'm just curious, like, how do you make the argument that it's good for everyone? I mean, it's sort of an obvious argument, but how do you guys put that into words for people?
Yeah, I mean, I can think about like, oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
You go first.
Well, I can
I've
think
been
about
going
like,
first this whole time.
I can think about like, let's talk about my experience in Pittsburgh. Um, you know, the Homewood neighborhood, the Hill District neighborhood, Hazelwood neighborhood, are all Black neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, the only time the Pittsburgh Post Gazette sometimes goes in is when something bad happens. During my time at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, I made sure that I always went into those neighborhoods to look for different stories, stories that need to be told. A lot of times you see images of, of white folks having fun and being happy, but you don't normally tend to see that when with Black and brown folks. So I made it a point to actually go out and always have those images. I say this over and over again, like you can't fully understand that Black lives matter until you actually see images of Black lives actually mattering. So it's important to have those counter images, and what that does also is that increases the neighborhood's trust in those newspapers, as it is before. The Post Gazette has a really bad reputation in those neighborhoods, and it's even worse now because of what happened to me and Alexis. But you that helps you build trust in those neighborhoods. And if you are there, when they have those block parties, those birthday parties, those celebrations, those neighborhoods aren't going to trust you.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say that, and it just benefits the audience because we want to relate to them as much as possible. It's kind of what Michael Santiago was saying, but like when the protests happened, like those are all my friends out there protesting. Those are my family members out there protesting. I knew a lot of those people. So for them to, like you said, see me out there, if I would have gotten the chance to go out there and say, hey, like, why are you here? Like, what pain are you feeling right now that you feel the need to break a window because you're so frustrated at, police brutality in this country? And I would be able to better put that into words than someone who couldn't imagine that experience. And so the audience gets to get that roundabout experience, and we may be able to change some minds about what is going on. We need to challenge these ideals, and especially when it comes to talking about race. I think that would be I think that's the benefit of having journalists of color, is that who else would if you're a white person or somebody who, like you said, only has maybe white people in their circle, then who else are you going to get this kind of information or viewpoint from, other than if your news outlet has people of color that are sort of experts on that situation.
And this is a good sort of follow-up exactly to that. Kurt Chandler asked again, do you think news organizations are primarily reporting to a white audience, and how do they change their perception of who their audience should be?
The answer is yes, and that is because of who is at the top. I mean, I don't want to keep pressing on it as if like all news organizations are bad and like all white editors are bad. It's like, no, a lot of this is implicit. A lot of it is subconscious. That's just natural. You hang out with people who look like you. You hang out with people in your area, and especially with images like Michael Santiago said on the media of positivity and things like that. This is what you gravitate to. It's conditioning. So it's not as if these editors are making these decisions because they're all racist or they hate people of color or anything like that. It's just an implicit bias that you may not even be aware of unless a journalist of color says, hey, like, we shouldn't be framing it like this. Like, let's talk about it from the other side of it. So I'm not sure if that answered the question.
No, it does.
Sorry. Oh, reporting to a white audience. Yeah. And like I said, it may not always be on purpose, but there's always, like I said, if I'm writing a story and 4 white editors read it, there's just automatically a certain gaze over what the story is about and who they think will be interested in it, because it's who, it's what interests them naturally. It's just nature. So that's why it's like, we keep talking about it, but like, you have to have other people at the table, literally, like, or else it'll continue to be that way.
Yeah, what she said.
So those are, a lot of that is about structural change, sort of top down, like what has to change in the newsroom, what has to change with these media companies. I wonder, we've got, our people listening right now are a lot of students, people of color, white students, all kinds, photojournalism, but print and broadcast. What do you tell a young journalism student? Like, what should they be doing with their own, both to advance their career, but also to make journalism a better, more sort of inclusive place?
What I would say about their own career is that, like, use your time wisely while you're in school. work as much as you can, and don't treat your classwork as classwork. Treat it as this actual work. Like your professors, they're not professors, they're your editors. So if you're working on an assignment for your class, go into that assignment with the assumption that you're going to pitch that to a magazine or to an online place, somewhere that you can get published. Because once you start having that mentality with that work, you start to see yourself as a professional, and you are a professional. You're a student, but at the same time, you are in this industry already. And I when I was in school, I looked at everything that way. And I just took advantage of the fact that I had the time to go out and make work, and had a professor who can help me critique and make that work better. So that's the biggest advice I can give. Treat schoolwork as actual work, and that you're going to get it published at some point.
Yeah, I would say on top of that would just be networking. Like, it's cliche, but literally this business is so small. And I found that out very quickly once like my name got thrust into the spotlight. Like, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, because all we do is play musical chairs in these different positions in these different companies. So like, whoever your editor is at this company may go on to somewhere where you want to work for in the future, or your coworker, or whatever the case may be. But join as many organizations as possible. I'm a part of National Association of Black Journalists. We have a big conference every year. We go down, there's a career fair. Even if you already have a job where you're not looking for a career, you never know. Like, what had happened to me is, like, I could have been sitting there comfortable. Oh, I'm like the Post-Gazette for the next couple of years, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden something happens and I need to call somebody up and say, hey, I'm looking for another job. Do you have anything, blah, blah, blah. So I would just say definitely network as much as you can, including with your professors and including with each other. Bring each other on these projects and things that you're doing, because you're only going to learn from each other, and you never know who that person might know. But it's really, really about who you know. Like I said, I mean, Marsha had reached out to me, but off the strength, she hadn't realized that I had met her already. But then once we got into the conversation, I was like, hey, do you remember that time you were at Temple and I met you? She was like, oh my gosh, yes. And of course that gave me a couple extra cookies, because I already met her before, and she was familiar with me and familiar with my work. So definitely network.
Yeah,
network.
Yeah. And to add to that,
and network some more.
So, some of your classmates after school, they might not become photographers, and they might become editors. And if they'll remember your character, if you're a hard worker and you can produce good work, and they'll remember you and they will give you work. A lot of the freelance work that I got was from a former classmate who became an editor. And like, she remembered that I worked my ass off, and I did a lot of work, and I took what I did seriously. So because of that, I got a lot of work from her. So treat your classmates well, and like, keep treat them well.
I'm getting a t-shirt made. The front's going to be treat your assignments like treat your teachers like editors, and then network on the back. And all set. I think that's both great advice. A couple more questions. We have a student who asks, is there anything that white journalists need to do a better job with when telling the stories of people of color? What would you tell your white counterparts?
I would say just be open-minded and empathetic. Like really, really try to, like, even if you don't understand it, ask more questions. Like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, it's not offensive to be like, hey, like, I'm a white person, like, I don't understand anything that you're talking about, and I really want our audience to get what it is that is, what that you're trying to say, what really the story is here. Can I follow up? Can you explain that for me again? Can you, like, nobody will be offended by that. Like, really, if there's something that you don't understand, or call up a journalist of color and ask them, like, hey, what should this angle be? I'm missing something here. But just be open-minded and empathetic, because there are so many experiences, us included, that aren't like yourself, like, so you just really, what's missing in this whole entire country is empathy of experiences other than your own, and being open to that, and understanding of that. And, like, this may have never happened to me. There may be a chance I'll never get shot by a police officer, but I'm going to try to understand why this affects the Black community, and why you're so upset by this, and why you're out here, for example. So I would just say those two things are really, really important. There's no harm in asking another follow-up question and be like, I don't think I'm getting this, or run it by somebody and call them back up, run it by somebody that of color, like, hey, is this correct? What do you think about this? And if they say you might be missing something, call that source back up and be like, hey, I really just wanted to follow up with you because, can you explain this and this point to me again? Or can I get this right? Like, there's no harm in that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, like as Alexis says, is being empathetic and think about how you're framing your questions. I remember when I was working on my thesis project in grad school, I was doing a story on mothers who had lost kids to gun violence, and one of the last interviews I did, I went in there with the empathetic mind, and when we were done, the lady looked at me and she thanked me, and she thanked me because the way that I framed the question, the way that I asked the questions was kind of like a healing process for her. I didn't make her feel that, her son dying was her fault or his fault, and I made the questions revolve around who her son was in his life. So, and that's all because I went in there with a level of empathy. And that's, as Alexis said, I mean, unfortunately, I kind of feel that there's a huge loss of empathy in the world, and people don't care about other people anymore. They care about themselves, and you have to care about your work and the people whose work that you're telling. As Alexis says, part of our job is to do no harm to the people who we're working for or working with, and that comes with being empathetic.
Michael, do you think, as a photographer, particularly a white photojournalist, I mean, the act of taking a picture is sometimes more confrontational, more aggressive is the wrong word, but more assertive than just asking someone a question. So do you think that dynamic of being a white photographer photographing people of color, or maybe even the reverse, is different to navigate? Is there different things?
I wouldn't say that. I don't necessarily say that it's different to navigate, and I'm never on that boat of if you're white, you can't tell Black stories. Anybody can tell certain stories, but sometimes you do have to ask yourself, am I the right person to tell this story? And sometimes you may not be. There's certain nuances and things that journalists of color pick up when they're photographing in their own communities that white photographers might not pick up on. And like if you're in a certain space, I mean, one thing that I would say, like, especially if you're out there covering like a Black Lives Matter protest, you gotta understand that these people aren't out there for a photo op. They're out there, because they're grieving and they're in pain, because somebody in the neighborhood was again unjustly murdered. And sometimes, like, I've seen it where white photographers go out there and they feel that they have power of the people who are out there photographing, and they're not giving people space, and people are out there grieving and they're all in people's faces and stuff like that. So just go in there knowing that people are out there grieving and they're not out there for a photo op.
Yeah, that's great advice. John Beal, one of our other professors, asks, what advice do you have for student journalists of color, particularly students of color? What, should they be doing?
Yeah, I would just say, just continue to stand up for yourself. Now more than ever, these conversations are happening, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer. The stuff that was happening with me wasn't just happening at the Pittsburgh Press-Gazette. There was, some racial reckoning in Philly, at the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post. So now, while race is kind of the topic of everyone's mind, take advantage of this moment and just really stand up for yourself, stand up for your other colleagues of color, and really just support each other. I mean, it's a lot of, especially being a journalist, there's a lot of trauma that we witness, and it's insane to think, and this is journalist period, white, Black, whoever, but like, we're there to cover the major tragedies and the sadness and the grief, and it's insane to think psychologically we wouldn't take any of that on. So I would just say for all journalists, just be sure to that you're taking care of yourself. I'm a big advocate of therapy. We don't have to go down that line, but like, I'm pushing that on everybody, but mental health is real, especially for the work that we do, because, we're covering these tragedies, we're covering mass shootings, we're covering, horrible weather incidents where people don't have any, what I mean? The first thing we're doing is knocking on the door and saying, hey, you want to talk about it? It's like, it's hard to do that. It's like door knocking and cold calling victims was like the worst part of the job for me. I hate it. but it has to be done because we have to, you know, kind of just document history in that way. But I would just say to just really, really take care of yourself, especially if you're a journalist of color covering these stories that are traumatic to your community. And don't be afraid to tell your editor, like, hey, like, I need a minute, like, you know, this is affecting me. I need a couple days, or, you know, I need some time to digest what I just covered, and just continue to stand up for yourself, because literally, like, you'll find another job. Like, be places that encourage you and that support you in that way. And if not, like, that old school mentality of like, you have to, you know, your resume has too much skipping around. I mean, literally, I told you I graduated from Temple in 2017, it's 2020, and I'm like 4 jobs in. So like that old like mentality of like, your resume has to be here for 2-3 years. Like, nah, I think Gen Z and millennials are like, we're not putting up with places that don't respect us, or you know, or in that kind of way, and we'll just go find something else. And I think that is true. You kind of have to put yourself first, because, you know, as soon as you leave, they'll replace you with somebody else and it'll be fine. These companies are like well-oiled machines. So just be sure that you're putting yourself first, always, always, always.
Yeah, and one thing that I would add is that, you know, try and have a good support system. I mean, unfortunately, there's, you know, we're always gonna have what's that word? That phrase, imposter syndrome. You know, that's very real. We're always gonna have imposter syndrome. So just, you know, believe in yourself. If you're in a certain place, you're there because you're meant to be there.
Good, that's great advice. A couple more questions. We're kind of winding down here, but I want to try to get to them if we can. Kurt asked, there were a lot of negatives in your experiences, obviously, with management at the Post-Gazette. Can you guys each maybe mention something that was positive about your experience?
At the Post-Gazette or in general? And just
I think this question is specifically about the Post-Gazette, but whatever, go for it.
You know, what was interesting is, you know, before that, I mean, of course there were little things here and there, but I hadn't felt any like blatant attacks on me before that had happened. But, you know, we were going through like the labor thing with the union. I mean, I kind of came in during a crazy time. But what I will say is, you know, and Michael Santiago was there too. I got there in October 1st of 2018. And, you know, a couple weeks later, the Tree of Life shooting happened. And, you know, Post-Gazette ended up winning a Pulitzer for it. But it was, you know, that's nothing to be like, yay, we won a Pulitzer because we got to cover this huge tragedy. Like, it was a weird feeling when we got it. But also it just showed like the real work that we put in. So that was just like a huge moment, because it was like on a national stage, but like nobody had coverage like we did. Like the networks were coming in, helicoptering in, staying for a couple of days. You know, Trump came in, stayed for a couple of days, but like we were covering that story day in and day out from all types of different angles, visually, written wise. I mean, it was just incredible. So I would say that was, you know, I was on the web team at the time. I wasn't reporting, but, you know, everybody kind of stepped up and played their part, while all eyes were on Pittsburgh. And I think we did, you know, some of the, like, literally the best work around that shooting. I would say that would be a positive. I know it's bleak, but
yeah, I mean, same with Alexis. I never really had any overt things that happened there. But I mean, for me, one of the best things there is just, you know, we had an extremely, up until like the ending of 2017 or 2018, whatever year that was, we had an extremely great newsroom. We, you know, Sally Stapleton was still there. David Shriven was still there. I had an amazing photo editor, Rebecca Drake. We still had a good core of people and extremely great and talented journalists at the Post-Gazette. And just working with them and just seeing the work and reading the work was, you know, was amazing. And, you know, I learned a lot from those people. It was, you know, it was unfortunate after they left that things kind of just started to go downhill. But just, you know, just working with some of those folks before they took off, and, you know, working those stories that we were allowed to work on was amazing. I learned a lot during that time.
Well, that's good. I'm glad there's some bright sides to all of that experience. Alexis, there's a question for you from one of our students. Do you feel that gender played a role in your newsroom discrimination?
No, because at the time our managing editor was a woman. So I don't think so. Specifically for that specific incident, she was the one who kind of made the call. She was the one that we were calling on afterwards and be like, hey, this is wrong, take this back. And she kind of just doubled down and tripled down and refused to let me back on that coverage, up until the time that she got demoted. So that I would say no, sadly. It
Interesting.
was
I
a woman who made the call.
I can disagree with that because I think that my decision necessarily play on race, but I think, I mean, like I said, I've never really gotten an explanation about why I was taken off, but I definitely feel that it was because I had the audacity to stand up for a Black woman.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think those two were correlated. Like being a
Yeah.
Black woman, I think I might have, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, sure. But also
There you go.
all you know, Black people say all skin folk and kinfolk, like all gender folk and whatever. Like, don't expect just because these, you know, there's women in these positions that they'll have your back. That's just not true. Unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah. So I have kind of one last question. There's actually a question that came in, and these will kind of double up on each other, I think. You know, you've gone from local paper, but now you're both sort of on the national stage, you're covering national stories. And we live in this crazy age where, you know, for 4 years, the media has been screamed at as being fake news. And now we've got some giant percentage of our country who won't even accept the results of an election. And I wonder, you know, people have sort of all sort of dropped into their own little silos of what they believe in the world. And I wonder what do you guys think journalism can do? What can you do to try and sort of cross over? Like, how do you convince someone who might not think that they're going to believe what you have to say, that they're going to believe what you have to report? And I don't even mean this as a color issue, though maybe it partly is.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. I was, for example, on election day, I was in Northampton County, which is right above Philadelphia, and it's a county that flipped from blue to red for like the first time in a very long time by like 6,000 votes or something in 2016. So we went to go talk to this GOP chairwoman who was like trying to get Trump elected again in this county, and like this county had a big reason why Pennsylvania had went red in 2016, and you know, we were asking about coronavirus, and she was saying like she doesn't blame the government, whatever your thoughts on it, whatever. But you know, she had said like her dad died of COVID, and she put no blame on how the government, you know, handled the virus. And, you know, even though the facts say that, you know, if these things had been done, or if you watch how other governments had treated the virus, you know, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in, and, you know, promoting social distancing and mask works, like all those things. And I was, you know, her dad had died from coronavirus. She said her husband was in the ICU for like 17 days with coronavirus. And yet, and still, like me and my production crew were the only people in there with masks on. And, you know, it's just like, it's hard. It's really, I mean, even when it's just the time that we're in with, you know, QAnon running around and conspiracy theories, like it's just so hard to convince people of willful ignorance. Some people just don't want to hear the truth, and also, I don't know if you saw a little bit off track, but there was this documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. But what it really did point out was like, with these algorithms and stuff, like some people see stuff that you'll never see. Like you think like, oh my God, everybody on my timeline thinks like me. And like, how could there be this other group of people that don't think like this at all? And that's because like the way the algorithm is set up, they're only thinking and seeing and information and sharing and liking and interacting with like-minded individuals. So it's really hard to convince somebody otherwise when all they've seen is articles about fake news and conspiracies and things like that. So the only thing you can do as a journalist really is just to keep telling the truth, keep fact checking. And that's really like, and the rest just has to fall into place. I mean, there's really nothing else we can do but just to keep saying, hey, these are the facts, here's the evidence, and people can choose to believe them or not. But that's what's so dangerous about the rhetoric coming out of the White House, is they put distrust into the media. And that's you know, that's the danger that we're in, is people don't believe that votes were votes and numbers are numbers. That's, you know, so it's going to be, I think, a while to kind of undo that damage. But the only thing we can do is just continue to present the truth. I mean, sad, but that's it.
Yeah, it's been extremely frustrating and frankly depressing. Like the last few days, I've just been like, I can't express how I feel, is how depressing this makes me feel, that people just don't believe actual facts. Like if, excuse me, like if anybody follows me on Twitter the last few days, I've been hammering down on media literacy. Like people don't have media literacy and don't think critically anymore. And it's sad, and I honestly really truly think that, you know, there needs to be some kind of like media literacy taught in middle school and high school, because I don't understand how the vast majority of people in this country don't understand the difference between fake news and actual news. And I mean, I don't know, just like Alexis said, we need to just keep hammering down to people what facts are, and it's just, I don't know, man, it's depressing. It's depressing me, to be honest with you.
I was hoping for a more uplifting response.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's gonna honestly, I think it's gonna be a long, hard battle the next couple of years because there's been a lot of damage done when it comes to journalism in this country. Frankly, because it's come from the highest places.
But on the bright side, our job has never been more important. We've never
Exactly.
had so much responsibility. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, the democracy is literally dependent on us continuing to report the facts and the media challenging people. Like when Trump did his speech last Thursday or whatever day that was, a couple networks chose to turn it off and say, hey, he's lying. This is dangerous. None of this is true. There has been no evidence of A, B, and C. Here is the truth. Like that's literally, you know, all we can do. And it was so important in that moment for those networks. A little 4 years too late, but they made the decision to finally fact check the man with the biggest platform in the entire world. So that's all we can really do is just continue to hammer that out.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, the people who have been doing that continuously have been journalists of color since this man went down those escalators, and we were called. I don't want to say crazy, but they were just saying that we weren't right, and you know, journalists of color have been saying this for like the last 5 years, and people are finally catching on.
Well, that's a little bit more hopeful. At least the sense that what you're doing is important and matters more than ever. I mean, maybe that's a good place to end.
Yeah, sure.
before we get too dark again. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you out there who've been listening. Yeah,
I want to put
look
my
forward to
email
seeing
in
your
the
work.
chat because I'm talking about networking, and I want you guys to be able to reach me if you have any questions.
Yeah, I'll put mine in there as well.
Oh, okay, that'd be wonderful. Yeah.
And Alexis J Reports on Twitter. You can also DM me. But yeah, thanks guys. Feel free to reach out with any questions, follow-ups, things you wanted to ask. It may take me a while to get back to you, but I will.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate both of you guys being here and giving us your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, is it not? They said if you don't see the info in the chat. Oh, it's only to panelists.
Oh, you sent it to the panelists.
Okay. Oh, I sent it to panelists also.
How do I send? Oh, and attendees. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Sorry, here we go.
All right. Well, hang on a sec so you can do that.
It's alexisdjohnson44@gmail.com and Alexis J Reports on Twitter.
And Michael, yours went out to everyone. Perfect.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Okay, cool.
Well, thank you
Thanks,
both.
guys.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
You too.
All right.